And our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is joining us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, President Donald Trump did recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights after Netanyahu called on the international community to do so. How important was the president's statement?
Well, Ephraim, it's a huge statement and really puts the United States right behind Israel in its determination to keep the Golan Heights. We can have a little history here. Why is the Golan Heights so important? It's a piece of land right there on the northern Galilee as a buffer between Israel and Syria. It was captured by Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War about 50 years ago. Before that, the Syrian army controlled the Golan Heights, and they were actually shelling Israeli fishermen in the Sea of Galilee. So when they captured that land, it really provided a buffer between Syria and Israel, one of its main enemies. Coming now to the present, Israel just uncovered the fact that Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in Syria and Lebanon, was trying to set up a military infrastructure on the other side of the Golan Heights. And if that had come to pass, that represents a really serious danger, military danger to Israel. So this statement by President Trump is historic. I mean, it was something that we had sat down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He was refusing to answer anything about that throughout his time. But then he made a statement last night with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu affirming what President Trump had said in that tweet.
As you just said, you did interview Secretary of State Mike Pompeo along with David Brody. He compared President Trump to the biblical Queen Esther. Tell us about that.
Well, that was the last question we asked the Secretary of State. We had about a 10-minute interview, and at the last, I asked him that question. Today is many people here in Jerusalem are celebrating the Feast of Purim. The Feast of Purim celebrates about 2,500 years ago when Queen Esther uncovered this plot by a Persian official named Haman who tried to wipe out, eradicate, annihilate the Jews. 2,500 years later, the Iranian government is still trying to do that. This is ancient Persia that's doing that. Every day there's breathing out threats that they want to drive the Jews into the sea. They want to destroy the Zionist element. So we asked him, could President Trump be sort of like a Queen Esther in modern days to save the Jewish people and protect them from a Persian or Iranian threat to destroy the Jewish people? And he said, as a Christian, I believe it's possible. And actually, Ephraim, that particular quote is being taken by the mainstream media. If you Google it today, Pompeo and Queen Esther, you'll see that story's really been carried by much of the mainstream media.
Indeed, we are. We will also let people know that they can actually see that interview on today's 700 Club and excerpts at cbnnews.com. Now, David Brody talked about the threat from Iran in his story. Does the Israeli government believe Pompeo will be successful in his attempt to work with some Sunni Muslim countries against Iran?
I think he will, and I think that's exactly the plan of Pompeo. I think it's the plan of Israel as well. The U.S. administration, all along, they're trying to gather the Sunni Arab nations as a bulwark against Iran having a land bridge all the way from Iran to the Mediterranean Sea. It's why he was in Kuwait. It's why last month there was a conference in Warsaw, gathering Sunni Arab nations and Israel. That was historic, Ephraim, where Sunni Arab nations were sitting down in a conference in public with the state of Israel. So I think this coalition of Sunni Arab nations and Israel facing Iran is exactly what the Trump administration is trying to do right now.
Before we let you go, what will you have for us on Jerusalem Dateline this evening?
Well, we're going to have almost the complete interview David Brody and myself did with Secretary of State Pompeo. We have another story about what's happening on the border with Hamas. We'll have a story on Purim and how people are celebrating that right now. It's very significant for the Jewish people. And we'll also be having a story expanding more about what's happening on the Golan Heights and why President Trump's decision, his tweet to stand behind Israel, sovereignty on the Golan Heights is so important. So that'll be on this week's Jerusalem Dateline. I hope people will tune in. We think it's going to be a great show.
Indeed it is. Thank you so much, Chris. And we want to remind people you can see Jerusalem Dateline tonight at 9:30. That is on the CBS.